Alan Ritchson isn't The Rock. He's not Chris Hemsworth. And he's definitely not one of those A-list Hollywood heartthrobs that studios are tripping over themselves to cast. But when he peeled off his shirt in the series Reacher, the entire internet, and maybe the world, paused for 3 full seconds. Sure, it was partly about the muscles, let's not lie. But it was something else too. That calm, calculated energy, the quiet danger in his eyes, the kind of presence that doesn't need words. A man who walks in a frame in a plain t-shirt and somehow feels like he stepped straight out of a classic action thriller. But behind that screen presence is someone who once got booted early from American Idol. Someone Hollywood shrugged off for over 15 years, grinding away in the shadows before finally landing a role that actually mattered. This is the unexpected, almost unbelievable journey of Alan Ritchson. How a failed singing contestant became Hollywood's new blueprint for what a modern leading man can look like. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The childhood and quiet beginnings of Alan Ritchson. Alan Ritchson was born on November 28, 1982, in Grand Forks, a quiet, unassuming town tucked in the middle of North Dakota. He grew up in a modest household. No ties to showbiz, no artistic lineage, no trust fund to ease his path. For many, that sounds like a forgettable starting point, but for Alan, it was exactly what gave him grit, discipline, and the relentless drive that would shape who he was going to become. His dad, David Ritchson, served in the U.S. Air Force. His mom was a devoted high school teacher, the kind who taught more about life than textbooks. Alan was the middle of 3 boys, sandwiched between 2 brothers. His childhood was molded by the strict discipline of a military father and the unwavering warmth of a loving mother. The Ritchson household didn't have much in terms of wealth, but they made sure the kids never felt like they were missing anything. Spiritually and emotionally, that tank was always full. Alan wasn't the loud, attention-seeking type of kid you might expect. He was introspective, quiet, more into sketching superheroes than playing sports. He could sit for hours drawing elaborate characters, bringing whole fantasy worlds to life on paper with nothing but his imagination. If you had asked young Alan what he wanted to be when he grew up, he wouldn't have said movie star or action hero. He would have said comic book artist. And that wasn't some fleeting childhood phase either. He had real talent. His drawings were expressive, detailed, and showed a rare sensitivity to form, movement, and storytelling, especially for someone his age. But over time, something became increasingly obvious. Alan had a presence. He was tall, naturally athletic, with the kind of bone structure that practically begged to be on camera. He looked like he belonged in the very comic books he used to sketch. Those features started to open doors. In high school, he started dabbling in performing arts. Music, theater, anything creative that could stir something inside him. To make some money on the side, he picked up part-time modeling gigs. Nothing glamorous, but it gave him his first taste of the spotlight, the camera, and learning how to hold a frame just by standing still. Even so, not even Alan knew where that path would lead. He wasn't chasing fame. He wasn't even chasing Hollywood. And let's be honest, Hollywood wasn't chasing him either. In casting directors' eyes, he was just another handsome guy with an okay voice and a gym membership. That's it. But life rarely sticks to a clean script. Sometimes the ones who get ignored the longest are the ones who rise the highest. The ones who get cut early, not because they lack talent, but because no one bothered to look deeper. Alan Ritchson is living proof of that. And trust me, his story was just getting started. From good-looking guy who couldn't sing to the role that changed everything. In 2004, American Idol was the biggest show in the country. It had already launched household names like Kelly Clarkson and Carrie Underwood. And every week, thousands of hopefuls lined up to audition, dreaming of fame and a shot at stardom. Somewhere in that sea of dreamers stood a tall, chiseled guy with movie star looks, confident eyes, and $1 million smile. His name? Alan Ritchson. And Alan didn't just show up to sing. He showed up to be remembered. To the surprise of both the judges and the millions watching at home, Alan walked onto the stage and took off his shirt. His sculpted body, ripped abs, and carved-from-marble frame instantly drew gasps, especially from Paula Abdul. But then he started to sing, and that magic started to fade. Simon Cowell, never one to sugarcoat, looked unimpressed. Paula smiled, but let's be honest, it probably had more to do with Alan's abs than his voice. Alan was cut quickly. No second chances, no dramatic send-off. Just gone. For most people, it would have been a brutal, humbling moment. Maybe even something you'd want to forget. But Alan handled it differently. Years later, reflecting on that moment, he said, "I knew I wasn't a singer, but I had to try, at least so people knew I was there." Funny enough, that short-lived TV moment turned out to be his first real break. He didn't make it far in the competition, landing somewhere around the top 87, but he stood out just enough to catch the attention of a few casting directors. Soon after, he was invited to audition for a role, and not just any role. It was Aquaman in the hit show Smallville, one of the first live-action portrayals of the iconic superhero. Think about that for a second. A guy who'd just been laughed off a singing competition, now stepping into the role of a superhero on primetime TV. It sounds like a stretch, even to Alan. But he didn't take the part to be famous. He took it to prove something. That he could be more than just a pretty face who couldn't carry a tune. And people noticed. His take on Aquaman, cool, quiet, magnetic, left an impression. He wasn't the lead, and he didn't have a ton of screen time. But every time he showed up, people paid attention. It wasn't the role that would make his career, but it was the first real signal. Alan Ritchson had arrived, and he wasn't going anywhere. After Smallville, more opportunities started trickling in. He landed roles on shows like 90210 and Blue Mountain State. Bit by bit, he began carving out a niche for himself. The charming, good-looking guy with a chiseled physique and just the right touch of wild energy and dry humor. He had that glint in his eye and a body that looked like it had been engineered in Marvel's Secret Lab. For a while, he became the go-to secret weapon in teen dramas. The low-key heartthrob fans couldn't stop crushing on. But even as his resume grew, Hollywood still wasn't quite ready to hand him the keys to the kingdom. Casting directors liked him. He was solid, dependable, good on camera, but he wasn't the guy. Not the guy you build a franchise around. Not the guy you bet the next big thing on. To them, Alan was the guy you call when you need a little extra eye candy, a killer smile, and a perfectly fitted shirt. And Alan knew it. He felt it. He once described it as feeling like he was trapped inside a glass box. Everyone could see him, but no one was really seeing him. They saw the surface, not the substance. For Alan, the spotlight wasn't the goal. What he really wanted was respect. To be seen, truly seen, for what he could bring to a role beyond just his looks. He hadn't entered Hollywood the usual way. He came in through a singing competition he had no business being on, thanks mostly to his appearance. And ever since that moment, he'd been fighting to break out of the very mold that got him in the door. That fight for legitimacy, for a shot to be more than a gimmick, was only just beginning. The struggles, the rejections, the doubts, and being forgotten. When Alan Ritchson shows up on screen, towering build, chiseled like a statue, striking features and a grin that could melt ice, it's easy to assume he was born for the red carpet. That he's exactly the kind of guy Hollywood would fall over itself to put front and center. But the reality? It couldn't be further from the glossy fantasy. Behind the abs and the movie star face is a road paved with detours, setbacks, and a staggering amount of waiting. It was a journey so frustrating that Alan genuinely considered walking away from all. In an interview following the surprise breakout success of Reacher, Alan said something that made the entire room go quiet. "I've been working hard for almost 20 years, and I've almost never, if ever, been anyone's first choice. I'm always plan B, C, sometimes even Z." There was no bitterness in his voice, just truth. For years, Alan put in the work, audition after audition, project after project. He'd walk into a casting room with confidence, give it everything he had, walk out smiling, and quietly carry that familiar sting of being overlooked. Not because he wasn't good, but because Hollywood didn't know what to do with a guy like him. More than once, directors told him flat out, "You're too bulky. You look more like a personal trainer than a lead in a dramatic film." Others said, "You're too handsome. People won't take you seriously." It sounds like a compliment, right? But it wasn't. It was just a more polite way of saying, "We don't see you as a real actor." And that was the knife that cut deepest. Because Alan never wanted to be a shirtless poster boy. He wanted to be heard. He wanted to embody characters with depth, pain, conflict, not just play the guy who looks good in slow motion. At the same time, the industry was changing. Social media was starting to reshape the whole system. Talent alone wasn't enough anymore. You needed followers, viral moments, a personal brand. Alan, being the private, grounded guy that he is, never leaned into that. He didn't play the fame game, and as a result, he started falling behind. He recalled one major audition where he absolutely crushed it. Everyone in the room loved his performance, and it was clear he was the strongest contender. But the role went to someone else. Why? That person had more followers, more online buzz, a louder footprint. Hollywood doesn't always want talent, Alan once said. It wants noise. And at that time in my life, I didn't have any. Again, there was no anger in his tone, just a kind of quiet surrender, the kind that settles in after you've lost one too many times, right at the finish line. There came a moment when Alan genuinely considered quitting acting altogether. He started writing scripts, directing short films, and pitching indie projects. Not because he had dreams of being a big-time producer, but because no one would give him a role worthy of what he knew he could do. And that label, just a pretty face, clung to him like something he couldn't wash off, no matter how hard he tried. When you've been reduced to your looks for that long, it's only natural to start wondering, maybe that's all I'll ever be. One of the few bright spots during that stretch was playing Hawk, aka Hank Hall, in the superhero series Titans. Fans loved him. His performance was raw, gritty, and memorable. But even that role didn't last. When the writers decided to kill off the character, it hit Alan hard. I realized I still wasn't seen as a long-term investment, he said. I was just a placeholder. And when they didn't need me anymore, they threw me out without blinking. That sense of disposability took a toll. Alan sank into a light depression. He stopped chasing roles, pulled back from the hustle, and started focusing on the small but solid things he'd been neglecting. Writing, reading, playing with his kids, just sitting still and letting himself breathe. But here's what makes Alan different. He didn't let the pain swallow him. He didn't spiral into blame or bitterness. Instead, he turned inward. He went back to the one thing that had always given him peace and purpose: faith. To Alan, faith isn't about promoting yourself. It's about anchoring yourself to something bigger than fame, success, or applause. It's what kept him human in an industry that tries so hard to strip that away. He started rebuilding from the inside out. No more chasing lucky breaks. No more praying for that one viral moment. He focused on one thing: being better each day. Quietly, deliberately, with a promise to himself. If the opportunity ever comes again, I'll be ready. And then, one day, the phone rang. It was Amazon Studios. They were looking for a new Jack Reacher. And Alan Ritchson knew. This time, he wasn't letting it slip away. Jack Reacher, the role that was made for him and changed everything. The name Jack Reacher carries weight all on its own. He's not your high-tech superhero in a mechanical suit. He's not a suave secret agent in a designer tux. Jack Reacher is the kind of guy who walks slowly into a roadside diner in some no-name town, orders a black coffee, surveys the room in 30 seconds flat, and silently calculates exactly how to take down everyone in it, if he has to. In the novels, Reacher is a former military cop. He's over 6 feet tall, weighs around 220 pounds, doesn't own a phone, doesn't have a home address, and never sticks around one place for long. But when things go sideways, he's the guy you want standing beside you. Reacher is the perfect mix of sharp intellect, brute strength, and primal instincts. He's the old-school man's man, rugged, solitary, dangerous, with a deeply rooted moral compass. Hollywood had tried to bring Reacher to life before. They cast Tom Cruise in 2 big-budget films. Now, Tom is a box office legend, no doubt. But let's be real, he's not Jack Reacher. Not because he's a bad actor, but because this role needed something Tom didn't have: sheer physical presence. Reacher is supposed to be the kind of guy who walks into a room and people instinctively straighten up. He's supposed to look like he could crush you without breaking a sweat, and predict your next 3 moves before you even blink. So when Amazon announced they were rebooting Reacher as a TV series, They made it clear. This time, they were doing it by the book. Literally. They wanted a Reacher who wasn't just faithful to the source material, but who felt like the character fans had pictured in their minds for decades. They needed presence, stillness, intelligence, power, danger, all in one man. That search led to a quiet, unassuming audition. No big press release, no hype, just Alan Ritchson walking into a room, tall, solid, calm, eyes like cold steel. He sat down and read a few lines. He didn't try to become Reacher. He just was. And something shifted. Nobody said anything. They didn't have to. The casting team knew instantly. This wasn't about finding someone who could play the role. It was about recognizing the guy this role had been waiting for. Alan wasn't just a good fit. He was Jack Reacher. It felt like his entire life had been guiding him to this one moment. Every setback, every failure, every overlooked audition, all leading here. When Reacher finally dropped on Amazon Prime in February 2022, any remaining doubt vanished. There was no massive marketing blitz, no A-list co-star to boost visibility. And yet, within days, the show exploded worldwide. IMDb gave it a solid 8.1. Rotten Tomatoes? A glowing 92%. Critics and fans alike agreed. This wasn't just a good show. It was the real deal. But the most talked about part wasn't the plot twists, wasn't the perfectly choreographed fight scenes. It was Alan's Reacher. People didn't just watch him, they believed him. As if the character they'd been reading for 20 years had finally stepped off the page and come alive. Social media lit up with praise. Fans wrote think pieces calling Alan the Reacher we always imagined. Clips of his fight scenes went viral, racking up millions of views. News outlets started referring to him with a new title, The Definitive Reacher. And just like that, the guy who once got laughed off a singing competition was now the face of a global action franchise. The man who was passed over because he wasn't famous enough had become a name everyone was talking about. Alan didn't have to scream for attention. He didn't have to campaign or beg. He just stepped into the frame, and the world went quiet. Alan Ritchson's net worth, income, and quiet life. If you're picturing Alan Ritchson living the typical Hollywood lifestyle, speeding down the highway in a Lamborghini, flashing $1 million watch on the red carpet, you're in for a surprise. That's just not his thing. Alan isn't flashy. He doesn't chase noise. And he definitely doesn't treat wealth like it's something to be flaunted. That said, yeah, he's rich, but it's the quiet kind of rich. The smart, under-the-radar kind. According to sources like Celebrity Net Worth and Forbes, Alan's net worth as of 2024 is estimated between $1 million and $12 million. Sure, compared to top-tier Hollywood heavyweights, that might not seem like a jaw-dropping figure. But what makes it meaningful is how he earned it, slowly, steadily, year after year, by building a career from scratch. Alan didn't hit it big with one explosive blockbuster. His income grew gradually, role by role, with hard work and consistency. Two things that are in short supply in an industry that thrives on luck and trends. His biggest financial win to date? Reacher, no doubt. Reports say he earns between $500,000 and over $1 million per season, on top of bonuses tied to viewership and contract extensions. And given how Reacher has shattered expectations, it's safe to say the checks reflect that success. Beyond Reacher, Alan's appeared in hits like The Hunger Games, Catching Fire, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and the DC series Titans. While those weren't lead roles, they still brought in steady six-figure paydays and helped cement his rep as a reliable, commanding presence on screen. But here's something most people don't know. Alan's also a producer and indie filmmaker. Alongside his wife, Catherine, he co-founded Phantom 4 Films, a production company focused on smaller, more meaningful stories. The kind that might not break the internet, but stick with you long after the credits roll. These indie projects don't rake in Marvel-level profits, but they bring in consistent revenue, and more importantly, creative freedom. It's where Alan gets to tell stories his way, without fitting into Hollywood's commercial mold. He's not big on brand deals, either. But when Alan does partner with a company, it's always intentional. His collaborations usually revolve around fitness, health, and clean living. things he actually practices. He's not plastering his face on every energy drink and supplement out there. Each deal reflects his values: quality, simplicity, purpose, and longevity. Unlike many stars who settle down in Los Angeles to stay close to the industry, Alan and his family live in Florida. Their home is spacious, peaceful, surrounded by trees and sunshine. It's where he and Catherine raise their 3 sons, unwind, recharge, and breathe. He also owns a few small real estate properties, not to flip for a quick buck, but to invest in long-term stability. You won't find his house in Architectural Digest. No film crews doing house tours. Alan guards his privacy fiercely. For him, home isn't a showroom. It's sacred. Alan doesn't live to impress. He lives to enjoy. You won't see him stepping out of a matte black sports car at some exclusive party or rocking sunglasses at midnight to pick up almond milk. More likely, you'll see him in an SUV big enough for his wife, 3 kids, and a few dumbbells in the trunk. Practical, comfortable, enough. His daily diet? It's not rare whiskey, Wagyu steak, or gold-covered sushi. It's boiled chicken breast, sweet potatoes, steamed broccoli. Eat, train, repeat. No frills, all function. For Alan, it's a form of meditation through discipline. He's not chasing TikTok trends, not farming likes on Instagram, not preaching life advice in selfie videos. The only thing Alan Ritchson really chases? Quality. In his work, in his relationships, in how he shows up day in, day out. When asked about his financial goals, Alan once gave an answer that caught people off guard. I don't need to be a millionaire overnight. I just want enough to take care of my family, support the people I love, and keep doing what makes me smile when I wake up in the morning. In a world obsessed with speed, attention, and nonstop hustle, Alan has chosen a different path, slower, more grounded, and far more authentic. He may not be the loudest guy in the room, but if you look closely, you'll realize he's the kind of person you'd want as a friend, the kind of guy you trust, the kind of man you might even aspire to be. Alan Ritchson is a rare breed, sincere, humble, and quietly powerful.